Hello and welcome to A Tippling Philosopher with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. We're going to have a walk through the front lines today. Just the TLDR. Not a lot has happened on the front line. Not a lot at all. But a few bits to talk about. Okay, let's start with this idea that Belarus are going to come down and attack into Ukraine. And there are lots of theories flying around that they're going to pop down here and maybe even cut off supply routes from the west to the east of Ukraine, such that all these weapons and fuel and everything else that's being pulled into the front lines will be severed. Those supply routes will be severed. Realistically, that's never going to happen. Belarus themselves don't have a big enough army to be able to do that, and uh, the Russians that are being actually poured into Belarus appear to be for training purposes, and it will be pretty, I don't know, toothless attack. I would think if the Russians and Belarusians did attempt attack from the north. This is because the Ukrainians have produced quite a defensive line across the north. These are marshes here, but they've also been building defenses ever since they kicked the Russians out of Kyiv. These areas will be heavily mined. There'll be fortifications, and we know that they've got sort of reactionary forces around the towns of the north. So you've got these different places that will have reactionary forces positioned in such an event that the Russians attack from the north. I just think it's really unlikely. But people like to theorize about these things. I just don't think they have the capability to actually come down here and sever supplies. It's just, I don't think it's realistically going to happen. In fact, British intelligence seems to agree. So on 14th of October 2022, Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko said that 70,000 Belarusian troops and up to 15,000 Russians would be involved in a new Russian-Belarusian group of forces. On the 15th of October 2020, the Belarusian authorities released a video claiming to show the arrival of Russian troops in Belarus. However, to date, it is unlikely that Russia has actually deployed a significant number of extra troops to Belarus. It seems that those are trainees, and in fact, 70,000 is not the number of troops you'd have on the front line. You'd have 10,000 probably frontline troops, and that's just not enough to do what they if you're actually going to send a force in here to cut off the east from the west, you're going to need a phenomenal amount of troops, bypassing Kyiv, all these cities and being attacked from all these sort of defenses that will be in position around here. And of course, having to get over difficult defenses built in the north and those marshes I talked about. So Russia is unlikely to be able to generate combat-ready formations of the claimed size its forces are committed to in Ukraine. The Belarusian military highly likely maintains minimal capability to undertake complex operations. I think this is Lukashenko virtue signaling to Russia that he's with the Russians, he's there to help, as well as being sort of propaganda that the Belarusians have more capability than they really do, and to keep the Ukrainians on their feet and therefore divert effort, time, and resources away to this northern front line, and therefore away from where they're needed in the actual front lines. The announcement is likely an attempt to demonstrate Russian-Belarusian solidarity and to convince Ukraine to divert forces to guard the northern border. So exactly what I was saying there. Here's an indication of how quiet things are just now. Here's the Ukrainian official stats. 100 Russian personnel liquidated yesterday. That is about the lowest I've seen for a long time. It's usually up, at the moment, it's been up around the 500 mark every day. So that shows that things are quiet on the fronts. There are claims that lots of Russian, particularly mobilized troops, are surrendering. They've got this "I want to live" project. The Ukrainians and Zelensky has recorded things in Russian saying, we'll look after you, Geneva Convention. Please surrender rather than die. And there are reports that they've had over 3,000 applicants for its "I Want to Live" project. So there you go. If we move over to the Kupiansk to Svatove to Kreminna front line, so just to let you know, that is over here in the northeast. If my mouse actually works. No, it doesn't. I appear not to be. There we go. There we go. We're Kupiansk-Svatove-Kreminna via Svatove. We're going to just concentrate on this northern part, north of Kupiansk. And I'm going to go to my own sort of Google Earth map that I was using yesterday. I trialed yesterday. So we're going to go north of Kupiansk. Here's Kupiansk. Go to Svatove, and that goes down to Kreminna down here. So we're going to zoom in to this area just to the north in this wooded area. There's Tevelzhanka, so lots of fighting going on. And I said yesterday that this small village of Horobivka was taken by the Russians, and that in fact they are there are claims today that Liman Pershi is contested, the Russians are claiming, and that they're also claiming that Dvorichny has been taken. So it could look something like this, and that, but actually I'm not 100% sure that is actually what's happening, and as the Russians are making quite a few claims around here. But I would concede that they are pressuring all along here, and Liman Pershi as well. You've got to get these things into perspective, right? So yesterday, when people say, "Oh, the Russians are counterattacking, Horobivka's been lost," and this is showing the Russians are going to march sort of westwards, and you're thinking, and then they're going to march towards Kharkiv. And you're like, you do realise how small that village is, right? As if suddenly this is like everything around here is under threat. This is just the to and fro, ebbing and flowing of these front lines. That you are going to have concentrations around here as the other side are concentrating somewhere else, and each side will be looking for weaknesses. And it's to some extent it's a game of cat and mouse. The Ukrainians are going to be worrying more about Svatove, and any small village that's lost here, yeah, they will react to, and they will push back for sure, but it's not a sign of things to come type thing. A few things to note of that entire front line. So going back up to north of Kupiansk, here's another map saying, here the Russians, they are contesting these small villages and towns. But this is quite interesting from a pro-Russian blogger, Anastasia Kashavarova. It gives some juicy details about the situation in Svatove. Apparently mobilized troops have retreated. There is infighting between the local military leadership, and people are being lied to. Family members are being lied to about who is deceased. You've got a bit of pro-Russian blogging, and some of these military bloggers and pro-Russian nationalists having a pop at the situation in Svatove here particularly. And she says, "I have hope for Surovikin that he will deal with this. I'll give all the data and phone numbers." So she's almost sort of reporting some of these people having guns held to their heads and so on. It's just, not looking good. Is that a little bit of a reflection of how things are how the Russians are feeling up there? I don't know. Realistically, that's all that's happened along this front line, and almost along the entire front line. There are usual claims around sort of Kreminna. We've still got pressure on and shelling around Torsky and Tierney and these areas up. So let me show you on this map here. So as we zoom out and we come past Svatove, and we come further down, so Svatove is here. Further down, we've got the Sherebets River here, and these towns on this river. We've got the Krasna River here, coming down to Kreminna, which is here. And the Russians are still hitting Terny, Torsky, and Dobrova with shelling and putting pressure on these towns here. Meanwhile, the Ukrainians, one thinks, are amassing forces ready for some move. The Russians are giving themselves a bit of a buffer zone here, a bit of a breather. If we come further down to Bakhmut, so further down this line to Bakhmut, there are still the claims that Russia keep making about making advances and this and that. Well, I would still think that Opitny is basically, this is sort of a grey zone here, but Opitny isn't under Russian control, and they are pressing towards Klishchivka. There are claims that they are pushing further south here, but I'll keep the map as it is there at the moment. Soledar under pressure, Bakhmutsky under pressure, and the Russians are pressuring further south because they want to make this pincer movement. The Russians obviously want to make this move around here, and this move up to the north around here. And that cuts out some of the roads, but it also means that they don't have to do this heavy fighting right through the town, which is quite well fortified and defended. Ukrainians have been there for a long time, and I don't think they want to do that. They'd rather encircle it, cut off these roads, and force the Ukrainians to pull out, like the Ukrainians did in Liman. Let's be honest, that's exactly what happened. So let's show those roads. In fact, so there are your roads, and really the Russians want to cut off that road and this road up here, forcing the Ukrainians to use a smaller road for supplies or to extract themselves from there. And then after Bakhmut, if we then look at Avdivka, so this is just a town just north of Donetsk, the city of Donetsk. We have this push outwards through Pisky to Pervomaisky. This is kind of what it looks like. You got Pervomaisky here, Pisky there, and you've got these little sort of villages around Avdivka. And this is a thorn in the side of the Russians. And the Russians are attempting to encircle it. Well, the Russians do claim, some real pro-Russian sources claim that they control these little villages and that the encirclement is becoming more complete. So it's another Epitany and Vodyane and over to Netalove. But the Ukrainians are saying, no. So it looks like there's still this kind of encirclement, but of course the Russians will want to do, like they want to do in Bakhmut, which is to encircle, and then the Ukrainians will have to extract out of there or surrender. And this is what the deep state map looks like, very, very similar. So they don't have these villages here under Russian control, but they also don't have Pervomaisky under Russian control. They've just got Pisky. I don't know. Some people say you should use the deep state maps more. I find that they're a little bit behind. Maybe I think they don't get updated as often, of course, because people have got things to do. I find that sometimes they're sort of 24 hours behind, although Pervomaisky has been, under threat for a week, and they don't see that as being contested at all. They're just back at Pisky. So, that's what their map says. My map says something different. So, it's quiet all along the fronts until we get to Kherson, which is still pretty quiet. So just to let you know, there's nothing going on particularly. Usual sort of exchanging of shelling and artillery fire as we come all the way down to Kherson. Now, so much talk about Kherson. People are saying there are some theories going around trying to piece together some of the data. So some of the data suggests, or some claims suggest, that there are mobilized troops being pushed into Kherson, which is an odd thing considering the claim is that they are also trying to get civilians at least and possibly the armed forces out of Kherson. So why are they moving in some troops, mobilized troops? Well, one theory is that they're moving in mobilized troops to hold the lines while the experienced troops are pulled out, because the experienced troops are literally worth more than the mobilized troops. So they effectively could be sacrificing mobilized troops to do an operational withdrawal, tactical withdrawal. And the main concern is getting their experienced, battle-hardened, more effective troops out of Kherson without many losses. That seems pretty brutal to sacrifice those mobilized troops, but I wouldn't put anything past the Russians. All these claims and counterclaims concerning the dam here at Novokakhovka and what both the Ukrainians and the Russians are going to do with that dam. So Zelensky himself has claimed that the Russians have mined it. Then we had claims as well that it is being slowly, the water is being dumped from this reservoir slowly out here. And you got to wonder why they're trying to dump it. Is it because they think the Ukrainians are going to blow it and they want less water here to cause trouble down here, the Russians? Or is it because the Russians are going to blow it, but they don't want to completely flood and destroy Kherson? They just want to do some amount of damage, or so on and so. There are all these different theories of who's going to do what. I would imagine the last thing that the Ukrainians want to do is blow the dam. So when the Russians say the Ukrainians are going to blow the dam, that is possibly, and what I would say far more likely, a false, is flagging up a false flag move that the Russians are going to do, which is blow up the dam and then claim that the Ukrainians blew it up. And all the damage and destruction that gets caused from that, they pin on the Ukrainians. But Zelensky said, hang on, we know, sorry, claims, we know that the Russians have mined the dam. So, who knows what's going to happen. Here's a little infographic about, so this is in French, toute la région, finally, after 20-something years, my French degree is useful. The whole Kherson region will be inundated in less than 2 hours. So with a wave of more than 4.8 meters of height, so 4.8 meter high wave will sort of flow down here from the dam in Novokakhovka, and this is the damage it will do, mainly on the southern sort of flatter floodplain regions. But it will be, if this is a city of Kherson, you would get some, particularly down here, some major problem for that city. It would be pretty devastating, and I can't, for the life of me, work out why the Ukrainians would ever want to do that. The theory is that they would want to flush out the remaining Russian troops with this, but they know just as much as anyone that there are huge amounts of civilians left in Kherson. In fact, on the Ukraine, the latest podcast, I think it was yesterday, there was someone who had been interviewing people from Kherson, and certain people saying, I feel we've been forced to leave. So they're leaving with, I've got a child, I've got a 9-year-old child, I want to look after them. So I'm going to Crimea, I'm getting on the buses and going to Crimea. And you got other people saying, I'm not leaving. I'm staying with my old family, my elderly relatives, look after them type thing. And yeah, we're not leaving. We'll just go into the basement and hide. Because what the Russians are saying is that the Ukrainians are going to come and they're going to shell the city, and you need to get out of here. And I think the idea is to kind of promote a forced deportation, or a kind of manipulated deportation, which you can argue is a war crime again, and another one to add to the list. We've got news, we've had information of all these filtration camps of Ukrainians being forced into Russia and filtered into these sort of different places in Russia, with children being separated and basically fostered off to families in Russia. This could be just what looks like it is another version of this, where you've got Ukrainians being taken down and filtered in through Crimea. And some people are doing that. Some people are staying. And you'll have a whole spectrum of people in Kherson and how much they support the Russians or don't support the Russians. So there you go. There are all these sorts of theories going on about what's going to happen with this dam. And it's really difficult to know. You've got news over the last day of bridges being hit. Here we have Novokakhovka. This is the dam here, and the road across that apparently there has been some vehicles possibly getting across there, and it's getting hit again. And there's been this pontoon ferry that's been operating down this channel here, just to let you know. Here's the Google map. So this is Novokakhovka, which is, in case you don't realize, I've got so many maps open, I'm trying to work out what's going on. So you've got Kherson, and it goes up to Novokakhovka, and then up to sort of Milove Ducheny. So you've got this front line here, and this is where we're zooming in. So Novokakhovka, and you've got a channel down here that apparently a pontoon ferry has been operating anyway. That apparently again has been hit by the Ukrainians, and the Antonivsky Bridge as well, which is back in Kherson. So you've got a bridge here that is being hit again overnight in the dark, and there have been surface-to-air missiles sent off by the Russians to try and intercept whatever it is that's coming to hit these. Almost certainly HIMARS. This is to stop Russians getting out, or even troops and equipment getting in. Again, the Russians are being very persistent because obviously they need those supply routes, so they keep opening them up and then they get shot down. There are these incursions that the Ukrainians have been doing over the past sort of week, really into Russian territory, and then the Russians say we've repelled them, and they've lost so much of this and so much of that. It's hard to know really what's going on. It's much more likely, I would think, that these are probing attacks to really try and understand. It's almost like a form of doing reconnaissance to get some information on the defenses that the Russians have around here in advance of a much bigger attack that comes. And so that when the big attack comes, they know exactly what to expect. So there have been these probing attacks over the past week, all along these lines. But again, not a lot of movement. There you go. That is what has been happening. Not a lot, but again, things are going to be happening very soon in the next sort of 48 hours, but then that keeps getting promised. Anyway, thank you for your support. Please like, subscribe, and share. So if you want to show your support for Atypical Philosopher, my channel, you can go to uasupporter.com/ATP. And that, if you buy any of this merchandise, so let's have a look at some keychains here. My channel gets a tiny bit of commission, so it'll be fantastic. You can get some keychains to show your support, or some mugs, or some caps, or anything there. Please do so. Otherwise, you can support my channel through Buy Me a Coffee, PayPal, YouTube thanks, all those kind of things. Details are down below. Anyway, as ever, thank you so much for your support. You take care, and I will see you in the Ukraine War Update extra video later.